of grapes him who sows seed, when the mountains will drip sweet wine, and all the hills will be dissolved. And it says sweet wine there. And the reason why they translate it sweet wine is because they know it's fruit juice. And again, you can see the bias in the translator, because they obviously knew it was, in the context, it wasn't alcoholic. They want you to know it, but they still want to use the word wine. The reason why I'm pointing all this out is you need to then be careful when you're reading your Old Testament. If you want to make an argument, whether it's alcoholic or not, you can't just go from this, well, it says wine. You need to actually go back and look at what word is being used. You need to know what context is being used. Another word that we mentioned before, sobe, that's juice concentrate. Sobe, take a look at Isaiah chapter 1, verse 22. Isaiah chapter 1, and in verse 22, it says, your silver has become dross, your drink diluted with water. What he's saying is, you have sobe, and somebody put too much water in it. So it tastes watered down. Mixed with water. And there's other verses up there too. All of these are usually referred to in the positive sense. They're all just referring to things that people drink. When you cross this line, though, and go this way, it starts becoming negative. And the word yayin can be used for it, but the word that's oftentimes translated is shakar, which is translated oftentimes as strong drink. Not all the time, but most often when you see shakar, it's translated as strong drink. Okay. But shakar is any fermented drink. It can be made from barley, it can be made from dates, it can be made from fruits, other types of grains. That's strong drink. In other words, natural beers would be called shakar in Hebrew. Not the fortified ones, just the natural brewed ones would be called shakar in Hebrew. And shakar is almost always condemned. I say almost always because there's two verses here that I put in purple that are exceptions to that rule. And we'll see this in a little bit. But we've already read Proverbs 20, verse 1 that says, wine is a mocker and strong drink is raging. Okay. We don't, in our society, a lot of people don't think about it that way. Most people don't call beer so bad that they call it raging. That's our society's view versus their society's view. In fact, shakar was almost always condemned. You can see this in, for instance, the priests. Priests were not allowed to use shakar. Take a look at Leviticus chapter 10 and verse 9. Leviticus chapter 10 and in verse 9. It says, do not drink wine or strong drink, neither you nor your sons with you, when you come into the tent of meeting, so that you may not die. It is a perpetual statute throughout all your generations. Priests were not allowed, especially when on duty, to drink shakar. The word there is for strong drink. And the reason's obvious. Priests were supposed to be serving God, and when you're got alcoholic drinks, that kind of interferes with your thinking process. And so it was forbidden to them. Another one is in Deuteronomy chapter 14. Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Kings weren't allowed to drink either. Let's take a look at Isaiah chapter 5, verse 11. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 11. So woe to those who rise early in the morning when they pursue strong drink. Not supposed to drink strong drink. That's not allowed for rulers. In fact, in Proverbs 30, there's advice from one of the mothers saying it's not for kings to drink. You know, the word shakar is not there, so I didn't have it you put it in that list. But that's not, again, something that's not allowed. Okay, isn't it? Let me go look. I think I got 31 down when I meant to have 30. Hold on just a second. No, it is 31. Yeah, Proverbs 31, verse 4. It's not for kings, O Lemuel. It's not for kings to drink wine. It's not for rulers to desire strong drink. In fact, she says, why? Lest they drink and forget what is decreed and pervert all the rights of the afflicted. They are judges, they are rulers. It's not for them to drink strong drink. The wine in there is yayin in the earlier part of that verse. Okay. Now there are two places, because people, whenever I bring this up, people always go to the only two places where shakar is used in a positive sense. They immediately jump to those, even though there's tons of other verses that talk about shakar being bad. They always jump to the two places where it's mentioned in a neutral sense. And let's take a look at it. One's Numbers 28, verse 7. And yes, I have went through and read all the verses where shakar is used. And these are the only two places you can say it's favorable. That's the only two. Every place else is obviously condemned. So when the libation shall be a fourth of a hin of each lamb in the holy place, you shall pour out a libation of strong drink to the Lord. Okay? In other words, when they did a meal offering, a grain offering, before they sacrificed it to God, before they put it on the burnt offering, they poured strong drink on top of it. Why would they do that? Well, grain doesn't burn real well. Put something with alcoholic content in there, it burns very well. Okay? Nobody's drinking this one in this passage. In this particular passage, it doesn't say anybody actually drinking it. It just says it was poured on the sacrifice before it was burnt. The other place is used is in Deuteronomy 14, verse 26. And this was one of the fellowship offerings that's mentioned here. It says, you shall spend your money on whatever your heart desires, for oxen, sheep, or wine, or strong drink, or whatever your heart desires, and you shall eat in the presence of the Lord your God, and rejoice with you in your household. And also you shall not neglect the Levite who is in your town, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. Now this one, you might be able to make an argument for it. They were supposed to buy whatever supplies they wanted for their offerings, and then they were to eat. But what's not absolutely clear in this passage is whether they ate the offering, or if they bought offerings and then ate a meal with it. But one of the things that you ought to know is that when they did do the offering, in this particular one, the Levite was to join them in the eating of that meal, to show that they were in fellowship. Well, from the Levites are the priests. Priests are not allowed to eat or drink shakar. Which basically, to me, probably indicates that what he's talking about is buy what you want for sacrifices and have a meal with it while the sacrifice is being offered. But otherwise, this is the only verse that one can even stretch to say somebody actually was told. I don't think God is telling the people to go get strong drink and go get drunk at his feast. That would not make sense compared to everything else that God has said. But otherwise, every single place where you look at shakar, it's always condemned. And what we should also note is that natural fermentation will not produce anything drink greater than 14% alcohol. The natural fermentation will kill the very yeast that's making the alcohol. So when they're talking about strong drink, they're talking about natural wines, not fortified wines. They're talking about natural beers. They were calling those strong drink, and it's very consistently condemned. And along with it also was condemned yayins, which were alcoholic. Those also fell in the same categories. And I ran out of time. I had still a little bit more to talk about for the Old Testament. I'm going to finish that off, and we're going to talk about the New Testament the next time we get through it. What I like to do is cover to show you that from history, they did have ways of preserving wine. One of the arguments for it is, well, they didn't have any way to preserve it, so of course it was always alcoholic. The answer is no. They had quite some clever ways of preserving wine, or grape juice, such that it wasn't alcoholic. So we'll cover those from history, just to show that it's there, and then we'll go into the New Testament and talk about that as well. It is not a lesson that would be encouraging one to become a Christian. What we're trying to do is answer the question is, can a Christian drink? In order to understand that, though, we need to know the history of it. We need to know what words are there. So we're trying to fill in those gaps. But at this time that we have, as we're gathered together, what we need to have is an opportunity that if there's anyone here who is not a child of God, there's no better time than right now to put on Christ. If there's anyone here is a child of God and would like to put the prayers of the brethren on their behalf, this is a time that we can have, as we're together, to offer those prayers for one another. Why don't you come forward as we stand and sing the song of the select.